Good morning, Heather Simmons, in your beautiful kitchen.
In my beautiful kitchen. Yes, I love this kitchen. Happy Wednesday.
I just want the refrigerator. Like, I want that double
Oh.
door, deep freeze, or what is it called? Sub zero, excuse me, sub zero
Mm-hmm.
refrigerator. I think it's just so awesome.
Just lots of fun to clean. That stainless steel.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really bad at that. I mean, I'm pretty good at cleaning for a dude. I mean, I like things clean. So I'm really good at cleaning, but I just am not good at cleaning a refrigerator door. It just, anyway, even when I use the stainless steel polish, it just does not come out
Yes.
looking great. My wife does it. She does it fantastic. I do it. I struggle. Oh, well. I need to learn how to get better at that. But hey, so we're talking about the potential looming government shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked this week and we were thinking, what did we want to talk about? So there was a few things that
Yeah.
we discussed on our pre-show meeting, but this one seemed to be a topic that everyone was interested in having us discuss. And I think that it's interesting because these things have really taken on a lot more significance going forward than they have, I think, in the past. So this is not a political discussion. We're not going to do anything as it
Yeah.
relates to the politics of why, what, and who. We're just staying out of that. And maybe we'll talk. We're going to talk a little bit about what doesn't potentially get funded and some of the other things about it. But the reality of it is, I think these things now are a lot more stressful for people than they ever have been before. And I think that there's just so much uncertainty in our world right now and in our country that something like this starts to come up and people start to get worried. And I noticed that when we had the debt ceiling issues where they were trying to work on that,
Mm-hmm.
people were in basically a wait and see approach as to, am I going to go book business? Am I going to go on am I going to go on a trip? I'm going to hold off for a while because I don't know what's going to happen with that. Now I think we're in the same thing with the government shutdown. People are also worried about booking a trip and worried about signing something for this deal or that deal, because if you're a company that's a federal contractor, if you're not in a um, critical area and there's not a designated appropriations bill where you have to be funded for that, you could not receive payment. And then there's a lot of employees who of the government, obviously, who won't be paid. They'll have to go to work, but they're not going to get any money for that. I mean, get their back pay, but until they get their back pay, they're not going to be receiving any money. So I think these things impact us a lot more than they have ever before.
No, I agree, and I see the concern, and like you said, the uncertainty across the board, and think about how we talked about and the impacts on human resources, or even more so the impacts on our employees and their their mentality and how they're facing things. It could be something that's work related, like you said, getting in business or losing business, but it also could be a spouse or a partner that's maybe working for the government that's adding some additional stress. There's just a lot of things I think that before we didn't think about that now are in the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff now has such a big trickle down effect, and I think your point is really good. You have somebody that's working, and then you have a spouse that maybe works for the federal government, and all of a sudden you're down to one income. Now, that it's not going to be forever, but you also don't know how long it's going to be. And if you look at some of the statistics right now of just how many people in the US are working from paycheck to paycheck, it's really frightening. And so something like this, if you have an employee in your organization and they have a spouse or significant other that is now not getting paid, that creates stress for them. And you don't know how many people are like that in your organization. So you have additional stress. You potentially have, customers in your business that are, potentially not signing a deal this quarter because they're afraid of, how long this is going to last, or maybe they're not making a payment. So these things in the past, I guess I was guilty of not thinking about them as seriously as I do now. And maybe that's because in the past it didn't seem like we had the kind of concerns that we do now. Now it seems like when these things come up, it's a lot more it's a lot more scary for people because there's just a huge lack of uncertainty.
Yeah, and in the past too, I think how we've come along in the years and things are much more transparent. We have all the social media. We have so many outlets for information to be passed through that perhaps is good. We have the additional information of what's going on in our country, but it may be information that beforehand we may not have been, you know, would have had access to as much. Of course, we had the news. And I think, about how can employers, human resources, what can they do to help their employees during this time while they're uncertain and to get through this. It's can be frightening for the business as well, but certainly want your employees to know that they have an avenue or resource to go if they need help.
And that's a good point. In corporations that I worked at, especially when I worked at BMC was all, and Cisco too, was always very, very much in the forefront of reaching out to employees to make sure that if they were in a difficult situation, that they could help them out. So I think this is one of those instances where, perhaps if this is something that doesn't get resolved, which we all hope it does, and if it continues for, a period of time, that you are able to reach out to your employees and say, hey, if anybody is going through some significant heartache because of, being down to, one income or not getting paid or whatever it is, that you can, your company will reach out to you and figure out some ways to assist you. And those kinds of things really go, a long way to help people and to really make them feel indebted to the organization. I know when we did things at BMC when Hurricane Harvey happened, and we had a huge amount of donations that came in, and we actually funded people to get their houses rebuilt through that donation program because we had such a great windfall of donations, and we help people out, and that really made people super excited about being part of BMC and seeing all the good things that we did. And Cisco was always very at the forefront of that, and they still are. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do as an organization to make people feel as good as they can, or to help them in these types of situations.
And that may be going out on a limb here, maybe not. But as we approach the end of the year,
we'll saw it down if it's too far out on them. We'll just saw you off. Okay.
But I wonder, this is the time of year where a lot of employers are revamping their handbooks, they're revamping their policies. And 3 years ago, we didn't think that we'd have a COVID policy in our handbooks. But has it come to a point where there needs to be a official communication policy or communication around, this is now the second time that this has come up this year, to inform employees or provide assistance. Is that going too far?
No, I think it's a really good point. I think I think this is when you talk about a crisis management plan, and this is, I think, a hallmark of a good crisis management plan. And my good friend, Billy Kearney, who is a crisis management expert, he would say this is something that you should potentially look at. So I think anything that, really is potentially going to impact your employees or your corporation in a negative way, or really overtly negative way, you should have in your plan. And I think that's a really good point, Heather, that, you would want to say, hey, when these things happen, how do we, start to reach out to our employee population to say that we're here from you, and to sort of, stem some of those worries. The other thing too, I think, is for employers, is if they have a lot of, government contracts, and maybe potentially they're in a situation where, their work will still be paid by the government through whatever appropriations act or is in place. You may want to communicate that to your employees so they're not panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, we have a lot of government contracts, are we going to get paid? Some people in your organization know that, but then there's still a lot that don't. So good communication is really key. So I like that idea of having that as part of your crisis management plan. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, we even talked about, you hit on a point when both you and Ray were speaking on the science behind pay transparency. And one thing that we mentioned in that presentation, in that information, is if people in general do not have information, what do? They make up their own truths. It's
Yeah,
just human nature.
exactly. I mean, and you presented on a number of things in that as well too. And I think that one of the things that we talked about was that your mind, just scientifically, and how it's wired, doesn't have the capability to just leave a problem in your brain in an open-ended fashion. It somehow has to solve the problem, and the solve doesn't necessarily have to make any sense. I mean, it can completely be wrong information. You could be completely making something up, but some people will be able to do that better than others, and others people will make things up that are just ridiculous in order to help them figure out the problem. So yeah, you're totally right. So the more communication, the better, so that you can know what's happening. If you're, like I said, if you're in a company, you have a lot of government contracts, and you have an employees are there and they're working. They're like, oh crap, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to get paid? How's the company going to get paid? What's going to happen? Do I get what are you going to do? So people go into a panic, and then they start to freak out. How am I going to pay my car bill? What am I going to do? And so the more that you can do things to alleviate those concerns where appropriate, and where legally feasible, yeah, I think that's another great point that you're making. You really want to do that.
Yeah,
Lack of information and lack of communication is really just such adverse effects within an organization. If you can make sure that you have good communication and you're putting those things out there, I think it makes your employees happier, and it makes the organization calm down. Because there's nothing worse for productivity than distracted employees. I know that we like to say now that remote work is supposedly, driving down productivity. Okay, we can, I'll fight about that one. But honestly, the thing that is worse for productivity is when employees are distracted about what's going on in the organization. I mean, if you've never worked in an organization where employees are distracted about, well, is there going to be a are we going to get taken over? Or are we going to get a new boss? Are we going to get a new CEO? Are we going to merge? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? I mean, everybody is just, talking and sending IMs and calling each other and chit-chatting about stuff rather than paying attention. So to me, as much as you can do to get people not distracted and focused on things, and that everything's going to be okay, needs to be an ongoing part of your communication strategy and employee communications. And it definitely needs, like you said, to be part of a crisis management strategy as well too. I think all these things, and you're right, social media has amplified so many things right now that we need, as leaders in an organization, we need to be ready to react to those things that have been amplified, and help calm them down. And I think one of the things, you and I talked about this morning, Heather, on a different topic, but relevant, is that the whole naming convention of things right now, meaning that everything that goes on in business has a name. And we were talking about how, when we talked about grumpy staying a while ago, and how popular of a topic that was, and how many people looked at it, or when we talked about, lazy girl jobs, even though I don't like that title, but we can go ad nauseum on the topics, but everything has a name, everything's branded, everything is viewed in a different lens than before. So this amplification of concerns, it just continues to happen. And so I think, as leaders and corporations, we have to recognize that we're in a whole new different ballgame in terms of the way people look and react to things, and we have to react to things more differently than we've ever had before.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I don't know if you played this game when you were younger. I think we did it in Girl Scouts, where you have a line of people, and I think it's called the whispering game. You whisper,
Telephone.
yeah, telephone of people. Purple polka dotted hippopotamus, something, and then you keep saying things down the line. And by the time it gets to the end of the line, or it's a whole different communication, and that's what happens when things are not at the forefront and not communicated very clearly and to a community or an audience. They're going to play telephone, and then people are going to believe what's at the end of that gossip line.
Yeah, and this is a really complicated topic. Like, if you went in and read about how things are funded and how things are not funded, and who's going to be working and who's not going to be working, who's furloughed and who's not furloughed, and who's going to get paid and who's not going to get paid. I mean, like, literally, it's like a Rubik's Cube trying to solve it, and you read all about it. Like, unless you were completely familiar with all of the government mandates, there's no way, just from reading things that are out there, you're going to be able to figure it out. So it's pretty complicated. So, that's why it becomes important for an organization to say, hey, everyone, we're good. We're going to get through this. We're blah, 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 as it relates to the federal government and getting paid and you getting paid and all these things. So, and there's probably companies that do that. And so that's awesome. And for the companies that don't do that, we're saying you probably should, because it's just another thing to let people be, quiet quit, I guess, or be disengaged. I don't know, however you want to call it. Some people now are calling quiet quitting or being disengaged or whatever it is, but it's just another one of those things that forces people into that corner when we don't do those things. And I think this is just a good topic to think about, because it really looks at or compares it to other topics that come up, to say we need to be, like you said, be more communicative about how we see these things, and be more sensitive to a lot of these things than we were in the past. I think sensitivity is the name of the game.
Yeah, and I even think about the organizations that are run or managed by the government that are assisting those in need. And this is a good time, even though it might be a time of chaos, but if there's a plan in place, there could even be a community event for a company to help those in need that are not going to get help during a potential shutdown. That's really, really scary. And people may not think about something like that to work through with, United Way or American Red Cross or any of those that may still be open to help those that may not be getting funds or care, whether it's a day or a month. Just those little things like that I think important are to be mindful of.
Well, yeah, and when you look at some of the things that some of the people that still have to go into work, of course, the military still goes into the work, even though some of those, our military is not getting paid, which is crazy. You look at certain federal law enforcement agencies. If you work for them, you're still having to go into work. I mean, literally, like, in some of those situations, you're not getting paid, and you still need to go put gas in the car to get to work. You still need to get your dry cleaning pressed. You still need to do all of those things that get yourself, into the into work and you're not getting paid for them. I mean, you will, but you're not right now. So, those are all stressors. And like you said, your idea of, hey, some let's put together a group that we can look for donations for these people and help them out if they're our neighbors, or they're in our places of worship or book club or whatever. Those are all things that we should definitely do. And these things, I mean, with social media, to your point, we're just more amplified. We just see the downstream effects of things like this more than we've ever been privy to before. So it's definitely something that I think we really need to take more ownership of, and companies and leadership needs to take more ownership of, and frankly, we hopefully can get through this quickly and not have these people be behind the curve for too long.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just brings to light how this. Oftentimes we see this and we think about ourselves, our families, but that's fine. That's human nature. But to just think beyond beyond that, and that how something like this can be concerning or be impactful to groups or people that we don't even think about, and that's what could make us a good community, and contributor to society, is to think beyond ourselves and others that may, like, for example, I certainly would want our law enforcement to still be able to go to work every day and to continue to protect us. So what better way than to perhaps help those men and women that are out there doing that during a time like this. So um, I think it's something that, if you haven't thought about it and you're in a place where you think that this is something that you want to add to a policy procedure, that's something certainly that Thrive HR, we can step in and help, help you develop it. We have people just like Jason mentioned, Bill and others that can help push these things along, so you have these things in place should it happen again.
Well, Billy was part of our team, and we loved it when Billy was part of our team. But Billy got basically the opportunity of a lifetime. He is now the crisis management guru aficionado for the Wynn Hotel in Vegas. So he's hobnobbing right now. So
Wow.
Billy has
Vegas.
left me behind, but I look forward to seeing him hopefully for the Super Bowl in February. But it really, you said something, and it really resonated with me about how silly this whole thing is. Like, hey, if you know or you see a federal law enforcement officer, buy them a tank of gas. I mean, like, oh my god, it's just silly that we're even having to like have this kind of a conversation, that we have to think about. Hey, this person's coming in and protecting us and looking out for us, and we're thinking about needing to buy them a tank of gas because maybe they can't afford it. But
Yeah.
I digress, and I hope that this gets solved quickly and we can help. We're here. I've put together, and the other folks on our team have put together amazing crisis management plans, so we'd love to do that for you. All right, anything else we should cover and talk about?
No, I think we've hit on everything. I don't see that anyone added any additional comments. So.
No, nobody added any comments. But if you've got any comments, put them in the put them up later, or send us an email, and we'll look forward to talking to you more about this. But we just felt really strongly about this is something that we needed to cover.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. How do people get a hold of you, Jason, if they want to get a hold of you?
They get a hold of me at Jason at Thrive HR Consulting. And Heather, how do they reach you?
Heather.simmons@thrivehrconsulting.com.
All right. We'll look forward to connecting. All right. Talk soon. Thanks, Heather.
Bye.